Welcome to episode 8 of the Tool and Tie podcast. Hey, welcome again to episode 8 of the Tool and Tie podcast. This is Sats, your host, and I'm joined again by my co-host, Poonam.
Hi, guys.
And today we got another really cool show for you guys. As promised last week, we're going to be talking to you guys about wainscoting this year. Not this year, but this time. That happens sometimes, you know? Now, it depends on who I talk to. Some people call it wainscoting, some people call it wainscoting, some people call it other things, but we're going to keep it simple. We're going to call it wainscoting, and if we do slip up and call it something else, hopefully you guys know what we're talking about. So, what I really want to start with this week's episode about is I want to give you some background and some history on wainscoting and where it really came from and what it's really all about. So, wainscoting was very popular back in the early 1900s, even 1800s, in a dining room. And the purpose behind wainscoting was to help protect the dining room from chairs pulling back and damaging the walls. So it was actually there as a safety net, but when you look at the aesthetics behind it, it did actually have some aesthetic appeal today, which is kind of, transformed into some of the houses that we see today and, some of those houses that have wainscoting in there. Now, some of the benefits of having that, it does act as a shield because it's not drywall that you're going to be bumping into. You're going to be bumping into solid wood. It has a tendency to take a little bit more wear and tear, and for that reason, it's a little bit more durable. Some of the other benefits behind wainscoting today is it's a very appealing look. So if you actually walk into a house where wainscoting is done properly, you'll see that the contrast between the wainscoting and the rest of the wall, it actually gives a very rich look to the home. And I've walked into several homes where they have a lot of paneling done, and sometimes they'll generally call wainscoting paneling. But paneling really is a lot more than just wainscoting. But when you walk into some of those homes and you see the detail behind it and some of the detail that they put in the wainscoting, it really does pop out and it gives a rich look to everybody. Now, wainscoting, if you get it done professionally, can get very costly. If you do it on your own, it could actually be fairly economical. So we're going to talk about later in this episode, we're going to talk about some of the costs behind some contractor bids that we got from wainscoting. And what it costs, again, to do it to ourselves. We love to do the DIY approach. I always encourage you to go and get some estimates from contractors, and we like to do it ourselves, and we like to do a comparison to see how much we saved in terms of cost. Now, just to get in terms, the look, right? Wainscoting comes in very different styles and fashions. I'll get into the wainscoting 101 sort of a little bit later in this episode, but it comes in various flavors and it comes in various designs nowadays. But before we get into that, I actually wanted to ask Poonam, who has got, a very big knack for design. I wanted to get her perspective on when we install wainscoting or wainscoting again in the house. What are some popular places where people are installing wainscoting today?
So that's a really good question. Wainscoting can really essentially be anywhere. You just don't want to do any overkill with having paneling everywhere throughout the house. Some of the areas where you find pretty much the biggest bang for your buck would definitely be in the hallways. So the corridors of like the foyer and things like that going into the family room and whatnot. As you had mentioned, Sats, earlier, where it originated, dining rooms. That's definitely a very good sort of place to do it. Definitely appreciates the value of the home. And you can also see it in bathrooms. So those are kind of the three areas where you want to sort of invest your time and energy into because it does bring you pretty good return on investment. However, you do see it in bedrooms. You can even see them in living rooms and other living spaces. So there's no cut and dry answer. It's just where you want to put it. And again, like I said, not to panel everywhere because, of course, the wainscoting will sort of lose its flavor if it's everywhere within the house.
Yeah, and we've actually walked into homes where we've seen some model homes where the wainscoting was literally everywhere, and they went wainscoting crazy. And we saw so much paneling that it kind of got a little, it got a little distracting. And so to Puno's point, you want to be very careful where you put it. Now, one of the trends that we are seeing is we are seeing a lot of them in bathrooms. And what they're actually doing is they're taking some wainscoting, and instead of capping it off with a chair rail or some kind of a trim on top, they're actually finishing it off with some tile. And then on top of the tile is where they put some of the is where they put the cap or the chair rail. So that's a trend that we're seeing. So that's sort of a tip for you guys. Now, I wanted to get a little bit into wainscoting 101. I've actually got an email from Brittany in Nova Scotia, Canada. So thank you very much, Brittany, for sending this email from Nova Scotia, Canada. And what she wanted some clarity on was what is composed of wainscoting. She's seen pictures of it, but she's not sure how do you start. You know, does it come pre-finished, and do you just stick it onto your wall, or do you have to construct it manually? So what's the process? So I'm going to break it down for you. So wainscoting comes in different flavors. You can get it prefabricated and pre-finished. There is a cost to that, and it depends on your level of how deep you want to go into the wainscoting process. Whether you want to do it yourself or you want it to have it pre-done. I'm one of those guys, and I know Bloom's the same, is we like to do it ourselves, and wainscoting is a fairly straightforward process. So you're typically going to pay anywhere between 40 to 60% more just to get it prefabricated, and you could do it on your own, and it's going to take a little bit more time, but I'd rather save that money and build that skill set so that you can utilize it somewhere else. So I'm going to give you a 101 on wainscoting. There's a few components to wainscoting. The first is the rail. So the rail is the horizontal piece that goes basically across your wall. And the stile is the vertical piece that goes from the top. So whether that be your chair rail, or if you put a horizontal piece and the chair rail on top, so that horizontal piece down to the baseboard is basically going to be your stile. So your stiles always travel vertically. Your rails always travel horizontally. So picture this. If we work from the bottom of your floor to the top, we're going to have your baseboard, which is going to go horizontally across the wall. We're going to have a whole bunch of stiles that sort of go up at different distances. So call it every 15 inches or every 16 or 18 or 20 inches. And then you're going to have another piece, which is called your rail, which is going to connect all your stiles across on the horizontal wall. And we're going to have this in the show notes. So this may sound a little confusing, but we'll definitely clarify this in the show notes. And then you're going to cap off your top. So whether it's going to be a nice finished thick chair rail, or it could even be a trim piece that kind of goes along the top. That's going to basically finish off your wainscot on the top. Now, one of the major problems that people have is actually allocating the proper spacing between the stiles. So I have a resolution for you guys. I've actually developed an Excel template that allows you to get the perfect spacing between stiles. So you don't have to rack your brain around a calculator. It's actually a baluster function on a calculator, and I've saved you all of that trouble. I've actually put it in Excel. You've just got to put in a few bits of information, and it'll actually tell you the exact spacing you need to space those stiles out. So be sure to check that out on toolandtie.com/episode 8 to get that free download for you guys. Trust me, it'll help you so much. Now, in terms of what happens in between, so in between your rails and stiles, you're going to make a box. You're basically going to have a whole bunch of boxes that go across your wall. There's different options. You can put a panel that has a kind of a breadboard kind of a look. You can put a raised panel, or you can keep it clean, or along your box, you can actually put molding across it and keep it clean. So again, all this is going to be very, very much clarified in the show notes. What we opted to do is we put some rails and stiles. So I put a 6-inch baseboard, I put a 4-inch rail, and my stiles were all about 3.5 inches. And then we just put a cap on top, and it looks fantastic. Again, you'll see this in the show notes as well. You have an option of either affixing a panel to your wall and painting it the same color, or you can paint your wall, just your drywall, the same color, and it looks great. And that's what we opted to do as well. And again, people don't know. They think it's just a whole bunch of boxes that are put on the wall and it's, prefabricated. So overall, it looks pretty good. So there's a whole bunch of different options. And when you look at the show notes, we'll show you what we did. And we'll maybe send out some links to some other options out there. Maybe I'll link to some YouTube videos as well. Now, in terms of assembling your rails and styles, there's a couple of options. What you can do is you can either use a board and batten approach, which is kind of where you lay down all of your rails and then you just put your styles on top at different distances and then put your top rail on and then your cap on top. Or you can do things like have a tongue and groove where you're actually going to pre-build it before you put it on the wall. So you're actually building your rails and styles on the floor using a tongue and groove approach, no screws, very clean look. Or you can use the Craig approach where you're actually screwing your rails and styles in advance and then putting that on the wall. And that's what we opted to do. And I actually have some pictures of what that looks like. So if you go to the show notes, that'll become a lot more clear to you as well. Now, one of the things we wanted to talk about was design elements. So again, I'm going to defer to Poonam on this one. When it came to design elements, we really wanted our wainscoting to pop. And it's not easy to just make it pop. Sometimes it gets hidden behind other things, or depending on the colors you use, it could look very not so sophisticated. So Poonam, do you have some tips for the audience in terms of if you were to put up a rail and style, if you put up a wainscot, what are some tips that you'd use to help make it pop?
So for the most part, the wainscoting is typically painted white. So you don't want to have a very light colored wall on the top. You kind of want to contrast it. And in our pictures that Sats is going to share with you guys in the show notes, you'll see that we actually went rather dark in the room. Now, being from a designer's perspective, I can understand some people shaking their heads and saying dark is not necessarily good because it closes the space in. And you guys are right. However, when you have a big space that you're working with, which is what we were working with, having that contrast of the darker color actually opened up the space, believe it or not. Just because we had the space to sort of work with, we weren't confined as far as space goes where we were doing our project. So I would recommend popping it with a darker color so that the wainscoting doesn't get blurred or sort of meshed in with the light colored wall, because you really want to accent not only the top of the wall, but you also want to accent the great wainscoting that's on the bottom. And if it's white or if it's a light gray, then it kind of just all blends together and you just don't get that same pop. And so you really want to be careful about that color of the wall that you want so that you can sort of kind of get not only the wall popping but also the wainscoting.
Yeah, so that's definitely some very good tips. So I want to share one more tip with you guys, and because I've never done this before, we both of us have never done any wainscoting before. This is kind of our first project, and we just read some articles online on how to do it. One of the things we quickly learned about wainscoting is your door trim really does matter. Now, if you got a builder grade door trim around your doors, in the out. So the area that we did our wainscoting was actually in our upper hallway, which is connected to so we have 4 bedrooms here, so it's connected to a bunch of doors as long as as well as a washroom. So the problem that we came across was when we actually put down the baseboards and the trim on top, the trim was actually slightly proud of the door trim. It looked really weird. And what I didn't want to do was shave it down at a 45-degree angle to match the door trim. That kind of would look silly. So one of the other costs that you got to keep in mind when you're doing your door trim is you may want to swap out your door trim for something that's a little bit more thicker. So what we did is we got a I think it's 3/4 inch door trim, and then we added a 1.5 inch back bend on top of that. So anything that was feeding into the actual door trim as long as it's less than 1.5 inches, you'll be fine. It'll finish nice and clean, and it won't pop out, and it won't look silly and ridiculous. So the cost to do the door trim was really negligible, in relation to the overall wainscoting. It was maybe 5% of the budget, so it's a very small price to pay, but definitely something I would suggest rather than just sort of finishing it off at a 45-degree angle and having it sort of die out or die into the door trim. Doesn't really look that great. I did try it, and which is why I'm saying it, and it really didn't look all that great. So now I think we've given you a perspective on wainscoting. We've sort of given you an idea of how it installs and sort of the benefits and the pros and cons. What we haven't really talked about is the cost. And again, I'm going to have Poonam sort of talk about some of the costs that were involved. I'm going to give you the average in terms of what the contractors quote us. Now, this was for 35 linear feet. So Poonam, when we actually got some of the quotes, we got some varying numbers between different contractors. But do you remember what that average was in terms of what we saw?
Yeah, so I think the average was around 3,400, if I remember correctly. And again, like Sat said, it was for 35 linear feet. So $3,400 sounds like quite a bit. And with our sort of DIY skills, we decided that we wanted to do it. When we did it, we actually had saved quite a bit of money. In total, I think we ended up spending about $650. And that was that was not including the paint. So the paint was separate. So I say in total, probably around $700 that we spent.
Yeah. And so when you kind of just look at those numbers, obviously, yes, if you got this outsourced, they would probably get it done faster. Boonam and I were able to get this done in 3 full days. So we spent a Friday afternoon, it's 2.5 full days, a Friday afternoon, a Saturday, and a Sunday, and then maybe a little bit of painting, maybe an hour or so of painting on a Monday. So almost 3 days for $700 versus the contractor quotes. And I'm only giving you the average, which is about $3,400. So it's a lot of money. We had some numbers that were, I think the lowest was about $3,000 and the highest was about $4,300 or so. So there is a definite cost to this. Now, in terms of material, that's what I didn't talk about yet. What we did opt for is we used poplar wood. And I've mentioned this in a previous podcast, that poplar wood is very, very easy to work with in terms of putting together. It is very, very easy to prime and paint. It sands very well as well. And again, in a previous episode, I talked about the paint. What we did opt for was the Benjamin Moore Advance here again. And again, we're not getting anything from Benjamin Moore. I just want to make that clear. We're just really suggesting a product that we found works really, really well. And again, like we talked about in the cabinet discussion, the Benjamin Moore paint starts to harden, and after about 50 or 60 days, you can kick it. And I mean, don't kick it too hard, but you can kick it, and there's really little damage to it, which is really nice. Now, one of the other really positive things about the wainscoting is, like I said, it gives you a rich look. So, when we have guests come over, the first question every guest asks us is, where did you get this done? And it's kind of funny because Poonam and I smile and we say, well, we kind of did this on our own. Now, the people that know us well enough, the first question they ask is, so did you guys really do this on your own? And, we kind of smile and say yes. But the guys that don't know we do a lot of our own DIY work often question us, and they sort of, say to us, I don't believe you. And that's where we have to bring out the pictures. But we did do this on our own, and we're rookies at this. We've never done this before. Sure, we made some mistakes, but Poonam and I are both of the belief that quality is king. And if there's a mistake, whether it be with the wood, whether it be with the painting, fix it, right? And the quality speaks for itself. And I think right now our wainscoting is, it's flawless. When I look at it, it really is flawless. And the fact that we were able to do it for $700 as opposed to paying the $3,400 and change to a contractor is a big win. So I hope you enjoyed the episode on the wainscoting. Now, I did want to finish off with one more thing, okay? My book. So I've actually got some emails from some folks saying, well, it's June, we're into June and your book hasn't been released yet. And I actually ran into some technical issues. This is the first ebook I've ever written, and I didn't know some of the technical things that I needed to get done before it got accepted on the different stores. So it's going to be a little delayed. Now, I'll keep you guys updated on the podcast, but it'll probably be a couple of weeks delayed now. There's also some other things that I have to go back and address. And I'm not one of those people that releases something that is 99% done. I'm one of those folks that actually releases something when it's 100%, and I am 100% confident with the quality. I have a very, very high standard for quality, and I'm not going to put something out there that is not 100%. It is not fair to you. It is not fair to me. So I apologize for the delay, and for those guys that did email me, I will keep you guys updated. It'll be another couple of weeks probably, but it is on its way. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode again on wainscoting. I hope it was educational for you guys. Again, I wanted to thank my co-host, Poonam, for being on the show.
No problem. My pleasure.
And she will probably be a regular on this show because ultimately, guys, she is my wife and she is my boss. So we work on this podcast together, but in life, she is my boss because she is my wife. But anyways, guys, so
I'm a great boss, by the way.
She is a great boss. She's very, very good, and I'm very, very lucky. But anyways, guys, so we will chat again next week on the Tool and Tie Show. Until then, be safe, be happy, and be productive.